Hi, welcome to Delaware Studios. Let's get to talk about adding Fragment to Android side menu library. I firstly introduced the side menu library from Yalintis few months back. Afterwards, there have been yearnings from my good listeners on how to create fragments for each menu items in the side menu drawer. In this tutorial, you will be learning on how to inflate different fragment layouts for each side menu. You will be improving on what you had. Let's get started. We'll be heading straight to Android Studio where I have the source code from that particular video you've just seen. We'll also be showing you the GitHub link so you could pick the source code from there, and I will be pushing this as well to the link after this video. A run review of the code. We have a side menu that actually make use of a library from Yalintis, which is included right there in the dependencies. Side menu Android 1.0.1. You also need to include the support designs and the app compat. Likewise, the circular review from the GitHub, also DRUKH. These are the major libraries that were used in this application. Right there in the res directory, the layout, we have the activity main, which is the launcher with its fragment called the main fragment. We have that somewhere set up, and we have other fragments inflated as well, because we'll be adding fragments to each of the menu right there in the side menu. The book fragment, the building fragment, case, movie fragment, and so on. The activity main looks this way, with the drawer layout as the top parent, which houses the review frame layout. Let's get to look at the preview. We have the preview just that way, and we have the content overlay where the content resides. The same thing goes with the content frame, all in linear layout. We have a toolbar where we can easily inflate the overflow menu and other toolbars menu. There's a scroll view which handles the drawer, which sits at the left corner, where we have the linear layout of the drawer. The rotation is vertical, width and height, HTTP and wrap content respectively. Wrapped around the scroll view with the drawer layout as the parent tag. Now we have the fragment main, which is the main fragment of the activity main. It actually uses a tag from the review frame layout from the coattail widget review frame layout, which handles the review effect. Once you click on each menu, there will be a review effect that actually shows up. We have a frame layout to actually house the container of the content, and right inside the frame layout you have an image view which we had earlier, an image view which will now be replaced by any content details in other fragments. A quick look at other fragments that will be inflated. We have the book fragment, just a copy of the fragment main, but now you need to take away the image view you had, just add a text view or something different. If you need to probably display a recycler view or display a card view or any layout you feel like displaying right there in your fragment. So a copy of this goes round to other fragments. The building fragment, can you see that? There's a building fragment. The case fragment for each menu, down to the shop fragment. We have that set up. Now let's get to look at how to include this in the main activity after each menu of the side menu would have been clicked. Head straight to the main activity, and I'll give a detailed rundown of how this works. The main activity extends app compact activity. We've extended this. Previously it was using the action bar activity, which has been deprecated. Now an app compact activity is actually going to help with the latest versions of Android, Lollipop and above, and it's actually going to look cool with other applications out there. It implements the view animator calling the view animator listener. We have the draw layout with the action bar draw toggle, a list of the side menu item. These are objects created instantiated with the array list. The content fragment, that's the main fragment of the launcher. An object of the view animator that will be used with the review. A where it's pointing to different drawables. We're actually not going to be making use of drawable after the first display because we need to inflate different fragments. We are not calling images right there in those fragments. You'll be calling different items. And a linear layout. Now you have to initialize all those fields and set onClick listener to the linear layout, which you override the onClick method and call the draw layout to point at the closed drawers. We'll get to look at that. At first, you replace the content frame, which is the frame of the content layout right there in the activity main, as I've said, it has this in the linear layout. You replace it with the content fragment, which actually showed up images. At first, you might decide to take this out and replace it with probably the home fragment if you feel like. You pass in the set action bar method where we get to get the support toolbar and set up the toolbar and do some other things. You also pass the create menu list. This is where you will be able to instantiate different menu item and call its appropriate drawables to the menu item, and that will be able to display right there in the side menu. You also instantiate the view animator, which calls on the content fragment at first and the draw layout. So it's actually pointed at the draw layout. On click of each menu, the view animator triggers. Right then, the create menu list, which was passed into the onCreate method, you instantiate the different slide menu item objects. Firstly, you point to the close. You have this constant right there in the content fragment. A peep into the content fragment. They're all sitting right there. The string constants we have there back to the main activity, and you instantiate them and call its appropriate drawables so it could display the menu item for each menu down to the movie. All this will run. You have to add that to the list. Cool. Afterwards, you set the action bar. While setting the action bar, you call on the toolbar because we actually use a toolbar right there in the activity main. You find its appropriate ID and you set different attributes to it. Get set support action bar to the toolbar. You can set home button enabled. You set the display home as up enabled. You also set the title. This time we're using the HTML to set the title to the toolbar. Likewise, there is a draw toggle which instantiates the new action bar draw toggle. You pass the host activity, the draw layout object, the nav draw icon to replace the up caret, that's the burger sign, and the open draw description with the close draw description. All those parameters will be housed into the action bar draw toggle class. Now you need to call the draw after it has settled in a completely closed state. On draw closed, you remove all views from the linear layout and invalidate the linear layout object. On draw slide, probably you're sliding up to reveal other menus rather than the side menu. There's a slide offset which is being calculated to actually show the menu content to the view animator. You call the draw open when the draw are settled in a completely open state. All these are passed into the set action bar, which will be triggered right there in the onCreate method. After that, you can have your post create the configuration change on create options menu to inflate the menus right there on the toolbar, the overflow menu, and so on. You can undo that. I want us to look at something quickly before we talk about the replace fragments. Let's get to talk about the on switch method, which you have to write after implementing the view animator listener. This is where you can get your hands on the slide menu item, the screenshotable, and the position of each menu. A switch case statement will be appropriate here to actually iterate through the different menu or the list of menu you have right there in the side menu. You firstly get the name from the slide menu item, since you have that specified right there in the content fragment in string constants. The first case depends on how you want to set them up, but definitely the first case is the close. You have to on click of the close side menu item, what should be triggered? It returns the replace building fragment, passing the screenshotable with its position. Now this is a method that will be run once you click the close menu. The same thing goes for the building. The replace building fragment triggers the book, the replace book fragment, paint down to the movie, and there's a default. If none of these menu items were present, it's actually going to call a default method. So let's get to look at each one of those methods. I might not be going through all of them, but once you have your hands on few, you'll be able to understand how to just replicate for other methods. The first one is the replace book fragment. It takes two parameters, the shortable and the top position. Definitely the position is an integer. You get the view, which is the content frame you're trying to replace the fragment on, which is the linear layout or it can be a frame layout. These radius will actually get the circular review animation to be triggered on that particular menu click. So you have the top position, you have the radius, and the interpolator set up to the animator. Also the duration. You start the animator to get that done. Now the juicy part is how you were able to replace the fragment with the fragment class. We have a fragment class called the book fragment. Create an object from that by instantiating it. Get the support fragment manager to begin transaction, and you replace the content frame with the object of the fragment and commit that. You return the book fragment object. Can you see that is specific or unique to the replace book fragment? The same thing is applicable to the replace building fragment, the replace paint fragment. You create different fragment classes for them, and you replace them gracefully with their methods. The paint fragment, likewise, the replace case fragment down to the replace movie fragment. So simple. We have different fragments created for each one of them. Now we have that set up. You can enable home button and do some other things from the main activity. Now let's get to look at the fragments that were created. If you notice, I have them listed: the book fragment, building fragment, case, and so on. Look at the book fragment. Just like the normal way you create your fragments, but this time you need to implement the screenshotable, because you're also passing that right there from the method. Probably if you want to take a screenshot of images and you want to replace images with them, or you might not need it since you want to do a different thing on your fragment, but you will always need the onCreate view of the fragment that actually inflates the layout that will be displayed right on the fragment, which is the book fragment I just showed in the layout files. The same way you replace you create your onCreate view and you return the root view, which will be used to call different IDs. Cool. You can extend further on this by working on the fragments. The fragment is just the same as an activity, but the fragment lives as a host on an activity, but it has its own lifecycle as well. So anything you do on the activity can also be done on the fragment. So you can further more. You can call the content provider, you can call the database, you can listen to different calls, you can broadcast anything right there from the fragment. So if you feel like you continue to extend on your fragment, you can create a list item, you can display recycler view, you can do all sorts on your fragment. Likewise, for the building fragment, we've been able to display the fragment. For the case fragment, you've been able to display the case fragment layout down to the shop fragments. So you could have different fragments for different menu item. A peep, in the manifest, we only have one activity with multiple fragments, so you don't have to register anything right there in the manifest. You have that set up, and you have the fragments created right there in the side menu. This is a question that have been popping up right there in the comment section for from my good users for me to create the fragments for each of this menu. Now you have it. I'll be committing this code to the GitHub link, and as well I will be showing the screencast so you could see how it's been displayed. With these few things, you should be able to get yourself rolling with the side menu library from Yalantis. Thank you guys, and bye bye for now.